Welcome to the Win, Make, Give Wealth Series. This section is covering assets and net worth. And as always, I'm joined with Bob Stewart and Chad Himes. Say hi, gentlemen.
Hi, gentlemen.
Ben, Chad, hello. Hello, hi.
You're both complete idiots.
Amen.
We're here with you.
If I could pick one word for you guys, it would be that I think both of you are assets.
Wait a minute.
I don't know. What was that? Where was that?
Where was the emphasis on that syllable to see how that worked out for us?
We are moving forward with the Wealth Series. And in order to do that, we need to calculate how many assets that we have and what our net worth is.
Yes.
So I just thought I would dive into the old Webster dictionary.
Okay.
And I just Googled, can you Google in a dictionary? I searched inside a dictionary for asset. And it says a useful or valuable thing or person or quality. It also said that an asset could be property owned by a person or a company, regarded as having value and available to meet our debts, commitments, or legacies. I like that description. The government might describe it as things like military equipment, such as planes, ships, communications, radar installations, etc.
I always like the etc.
etc.
Yes.
But for me, assets are the things that we own that have value. The things that we own that have value. When it comes to wealth building, I'm going to break this down into different types of assets. Right now, about 65% of the United States, probably Canada too, come home every night to a home they own instead of rent. For families making more than $78,000 a year annually, that number is almost 80%. And that home, gentlemen, is an asset. Right now, about 52% of all families have investments in the stock market. For families making over $100,000 a year, Bob, it's 88%. About 15% of people own at least part of a business. For families owning more than $130,000 a year, it's almost double, so 30%. You, listening to the Wealth Series, you might be one of those individuals. You might own your home. You might have an IRA or a 401k.
Yep.
You might have a Robinhood account and have some meme stocks like AMC and GameStop.
We know Bob does.
Maybe you might have some crypto that might still be worth something.
Yep.
Maybe
what
you
about
have
my
your own
comic book
business.
collection or my art on my wall or the posters all over my office?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. We might even have some money in our savings account, or we might own a car free and clear. But at the end of the day, do we think of ourselves as an asset owner, somebody that owns assets? Assets are all the things that we own that have a real dollar value. And most likely, everybody owns something of value. Bob, it's your Jordan shoe collection.
That's right. It is.
Chad, it's your baseball cards you've been packing around since you were 6 years old back in
someone make me an offer.
1942.
Hey, wait a minute.
But most of us don't think of assets in these terms. We tend to think that assets are things that rich people have or that investment managers talk about or we read about in the news, the data says that people with higher incomes are more likely to own assets. But why is that? Well, at the end of the day, assets are not reserved for the rich. They are the way people become rich. You hear that?
Yep. Say it again, though, for everybody who missed it.
Assets are not reserved for the rich. They are the way people become rich. There isn't just one way to become wealthy. There are many ways. But every way requires an accumulation of assets. There is a universal truth secret about wealth building. Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Cash flow quadrant.
both right, said, if you want to be rich, simply spend your life buying assets. Dave Ramsey wrote Total Money Makeover and kind of a famous radio talk show podcast guy, right?
Yep.
Says someone who never invests their money will never have any. Investing simply means you take the excess money that you have and you buy what, Chad?
Assets.
Exactly.
And that excess money is the money we found that difference in the last episode where we covered income and expenses.
Indeed.
Excellent.
When I think about types of assets, I'm going to give you 8, and there's probably more.
Okay.
But the first bucket of assets, so to speak, is equities, stocks,
Okay.
bonds, securities, a share of Apple, a share of Amazon, a share of Tesla.
So I want to hear you're saying there a share of. So in that, you're not saying I got to have like lots of, I might have a share of Disney stock that I got when I was a kid or something like that. That's an asset. It might not be a lot of asset, but that's an asset. And I can say I have assets now.
Yep.
Okay.
When you put your money into a retirement account,
Yep.
and that retirement account invests in a fund like a mutual fund or an index fund, that's equities. That's
Okay.
just you own lots of stocks or small shares of stocks.
So raise your hand, audience, if you already own an asset because you have something that Ben just discussed.
I just want to point out, ladies and gentlemen, that none of us can actually see you raising your hand. So that's a super weird request.
Hey, I was just going to hope they kept their hands on the wheel and didn't really. But yes, we're in a position where it's not that hard for those who don't have assets yet to be able to easily get an asset and start moving in the right direction just on the first definition of what an asset category was.
Second
Okay.
category, type of assets. Fixed income, also referred to sometimes as notes receivable. That's when you loan people money and people pay it back to you.
Oh, that's a concept.
That's interesting, huh? But it comes in a fixed amount every single month, like a payment
Okay.
from somebody.
Yep.
Maybe you sold your car on a owner finance and you sold house, or you're getting some sort of amount of money paid to you on a regular basis.
Okay.
That asset you don't actually have, but there is a balance out there that you're actually owed.
Okay. So it's
Makes
almost like
sense?
an accounts receivable that's getting paid on a regular basis to you for something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Third one, cash or cash equivalents.
Cash
Bo-
equivalent.
Bob Stewart's jar of coins
Yes.
that he's been saving up since he's a little kid.
Yep.
The cash that you have in your checking account
Okay.
or your savings account.
So literally the money under my mattress.
Yeah.
Right. That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Completely liquid. You could go get it today. You wouldn't have to sell anything or do anything. You could grab it.
Okay. So Ben, you everybody listening, I say everybody, everyone's probably got this asset because everybody probably could reach into their wallet right now and pull out $1 or their purse or scrounge through their car and find quarters in their sofa or something like that. So we all have some asset.
Sure.
Okay. What's a cash equivalent though? You say cash equivalent.
A check is a cash
Okay.
equivalent. It's something you could bring into the bank and cash.
And immediately turn it into cash easily with no troubles and all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next one, commodities. Commodities would be like if you owned access to oil or corn or sugar or wheat. That's a commodity.
Precious metals?
Sure.
Because I know they trade them too. I mean, all
Sure.
I can think about is
Sure.
trading spaces, right? And trading places
Yeah.
and the movie and
Yeah.
commodities to me.
Great.
Oranges.
Yeah, orange juice.
Orange juice. Yeah. Okay. Fifth one. Something that a lot of our listeners are super familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
A type of asset that we all want or a lot of us have.
Yep.
Real estate.
Yeah.
We own our house, or we own investment properties, or we own a building or apartment buildings or duplex. Real estate's a huge form of assets.
Yes.
Next, part of a business or
Okay.
all of a business, that's a business investment.
Mhm.
That's another type of asset.
Okay.
Next, insurance. When your insurance has a value, like many types of life insurance,
Yep.
it has a cash value of what you could pull out or cash it out today
Right.
if you needed to. That isn't an asset.
Okay.
Next one, personal belongings, including art, collectibles, your cars, personal items
Okay.
that you own free and clear or that have equity in them. If you owe $10,000 on a car but it's worth $30,000, you have a $20,000 asset there.
So something I could sell to make money off of, like Bob's shoe collection.
Yeah. Bob's shoe collection.
Right.
I like really old weird posters.
Right.
Like
I've got art around our house. things
Smokey
like
the Bear posters. And
Yes.
you have art of
different things.
paintings.
I
Yes.
won a Smokey the Bear coloring contest in first grade that I'm actually required to say every time somebody says Smokey the Bear.
Yes,
So,
I think we've
sorry.
heard it on the podcast a few
Okay,
times.
There it is. It's actually a legal requirement.
If
from
you
the
can't
Smokey people.
find the picture to show us, it doesn't count.
So
Okay.
when we talk about these types of assets,
Mm-hmm.
remember you will have gone to winmakegive.com
Yep.
/wealth, and you will have actually signed up for this series, and you will have downloaded the workbook.
And if you haven't, take the hint.
In the workbook, we list these types of assets, and we ask a question at the bottom that says, how many types of assets do you currently have? I have blank of the 8 assets.
Okay.
So take the time, go through and say, do you own any stocks? Do you have anybody that owes you money? Do you have any cash? Do you have any commodities? Do you own any real estate? Do you own any businesses? Do you have any art and collectibles? Do you have insurance that has value? I, doing this in real time,
Yep.
I have 6 of the 8 assets.
5 here.
I don't have insurance that has value,
Nope.
and I don't really own commodities.
Yeah.
Bob, did you do the exercise?
5.
5.
Which ones are you missing, Bob? I'm missing insurance. I'm missing commodities, and I'm not lending anybody money that they're giving me back.
Sorry, I have 6 then. I don't have commodities and I don't have like receivables.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
we do have
you have some insurance with
we
some
have
cash
we
value.
have life insurance that has cash value.
Awesome. Love those answers. Now, all of you, please do the same exact thing.
Okay.
Although if my personal possessions are my shoes, those are not an asset. Like those are not being sold. I wish we'd stop using that as an example, Ben. They're never being sold.
If
Your
something happened
kids-
to you, your wife or kids would
I
sell those
guarantee you
shoes.
they are
in a
going to sell them
heartbeat.
or give them away.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Second question. Which class of assets would you like to add this year that you don't have?
Okay.
Or would you like to increase because you just have a small amount of?
Okay.
Please write that answer in the workbook. Question number 3. In the workbook, I would like you to write the total value of each one of these assets.
So you're saying, Ben, as you mentioned, one of the assets you had was these collectible posters you have. You would say, to do the exercise properly, now go through every poster and say, here's what this one's worth, what this one's worth, what this one's worth. I have X amount in arts and collectibles.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, if you were to go to my personal net worth tracker,
Yep.
there is a tab called Art and Collectibles.
Sure.
And every one of these goofy posters in here, it has the name, the artist, what I paid for it, and what I think it's worth. For the most part, I value everything that I buy in that sort of category at what I paid for it.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yep.
I try not to inflate it and say, well, gosh, things have changed. It's worth a lot more now. I just tend to value it what I paid for it.
But if you wanted a true, you could go get an appraiser to come out and actually appraise it and say to you, it's worth this if you really wanted to go that extra step.
You sure could.
Okay.
This simple exercise is going to set you up to start filling out the Win, Make, Give net worth tracker, which is sent to you if you signed up at winmakegive.com/wealth, or if you go to winmakegive.com/resources to access the tracker, the spreadsheet.
Yep.
The very first step in calculating your net worth is to fill out what is the value of your cash. And you might put in checking. And then you're going to ask, what's the value of my cash in savings accounts, in actual hard cash,
Right.
in bonds or CDs, life insurance, annuities, that's payments that are paid to you over time.
Yep.
The value of your brokerage accounts, like your Robinhood or your Acorn,
Okay.
your mutual funds, your 401k, personally held stocks, real estate that you owe, your IRA, profit sharing pensions, your primary home, Chad, your value of your autos, your jewelry, your metal, your gems, your collectibles, your furnishing, your art, your baseball cards, your
Yes.
posters, your Michael Jordans,
Okay.
your fancy handbags.
All
Bob,
the things that you own, those personal things that you had in that list.
you're going to add them up by category
Okay.
so that you know how much you have in each one of these buckets, so to
Yep.
speak. And then you're going to add up the total value of all of your assets.
Okay. Now, remember, as you're going through this, Ben, you mentioned if I own a car that I'm making payments on, and we're just using your example, I still owe $10,000 on this $30,000 car. Kelly Blue Book tells me I could get $30,000 for it today. I have a $20,000 asset.
No. In this
Not for
exercise,
this exercise. Okay.
In this exercise, you're going to write down what is the value of the car.
Okay.
30,000. Because in the next piece, when we get there in a second, you're going to write down what do you owe on the car.
All right.
And the math is going to work itself out.
So we want everyone to be clear. This is asset as if you didn't have any payments on anything. What
Just
you
the
owe
value of it.
straight out on all these
Your house
things.
is worth 300,000, you write 300,000, not
Okay.
what you owe minus.
Mortgage on it.
Yes.
This is just your asset side of it, because you said we're going to then do part 2 of that, which will be the liability side of it.
Okay. So what I'd like to talk about now, before we dive into the next step of calculating our net worth,
Yep.
is that assets increase our wealth in 2 ways. Number 1, assets grow in value. Simple example. Average house in the United States over the last 30 years has increased at an average appreciation of 4%. So if you bought a home for $200,000 in 1 year, hypothetically, that would be worth $208,000.
Okay.
The real estate market for the last 3 years has been increasing at 12, 15, 18, 20, 25, 28%.
Yep.
So if you bought a home at 200,000 and it went up 18%, it's now worth 236.
Look at Ben with the math.
That was good. I
Right?
saw him kind of roll his eyes back in his head for just a quick second to pull the number out of there. But yeah,
Normally,
I'm
I
not
just turn to
impressive.
you, Bob, and
I'm
let
like
you do it.
Rain Man. You throw the toothpicks up in the air and I'll be like, whoa, 476.
Got it.
On average, an investment in the stock market increases over time,
Right.
especially when you diversify it into a lot of different stocks,
Okay.
like something based on the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in the United States. For the last 90 years, since 1928,
That's even older than me.
the S&P 500 has appreciated over 9% annually.
Wow.
So if you invested $1,000 in a year, it would be worth $1,090.
So we'll talk about stocks later on in the wealth series, but what you're telling Bob is don't panic when he looks at his Robinhood account and sees it going in a downward direction, as long as he doesn't sell.
Correct.
Okay.
So these assets appreciate and grow value over time without us doing anything, just by basically waiting. We know that the stock market falls sometimes, 2022.
Yep.
And we know that real estate prices have dropped sometimes, 2008, 2009.
yes.
However, over a longer period of time, these types of assets have always increased in value.
Okay. Got it.
This comes to one of the secrets that I say often about wealth building is the secret to staying poor is selling things that go up in value over time. Which means the secret to being rich, Bob, is what?
Buying things that go up in value?
Keeping things that go up in value.
Bob, you had a 50-50 on that. I was thinking it was one or the other.
Yeah, keeping. I was going to, it's funny because I was thinking as I'm looking at this list, I'm like, you probably don't sell many things on this list, Ben, very often, right? Like you could sell these posters, but they're still here 10 years later or however long.
Yeah. We look for assets that can grow in value over time, number one. So a car, like if we went and bought a new Ford 150,
Okay.
and we drove it like we wanted to use it,
Yep.
over time, does it go up in value or go down in
No, it
value?
depreciates.
It goes down in value.
Right.
Right? As Chad said, it
Yep,
depreciates.
goes down.
So that's not a good asset.
Correct.
It goes down in value. We were to buy an old Ford Mustang.
Sure. Like a 1950 something Mustang, classic.
If Chad found a 1950
Did
Mustang,
they make them back then?
we would all have lots of questions because Mustangs were first introduced in 1964 and a half.
There you go. So if I found one, I should be worried about that.
Yeah, that would be a challenge.
Got it. Okay.
That'd be a challenge. Yeah.
Cars, not Chad's thing. Next.
Yeah. Okay. Classic cars go up in value.
Right.
Regular cars tend to go down in value.
Yes.
Always exceptions, but in general, that's not a good asset. A good asset goes up in value.
Like the house, real estate overall is going to go up in value.
Yeah. Now, there's a second thing that we look for in assets.
Okay.
Assets that can generate income. The best assets generate money, specifically passive income. And you don't have to sell that asset in order to realize it. So I think, let's stick with our poster theme today,
Okay.
that this poster, let's say we paid $100 for it,
Okay.
that since I've paid $100 for this vintage poster,
Yep.
now maybe it's worth $200.
Sure.
I've done good. I've doubled my money.
Sure.
But during that time of owning it, I received no income.
Right.
And the only way for me to get income is to sell the poster.
Right.
Well, what's the problem with that?
We have to sell the poster.
I love the poster.
Right.
I don't want to sell it.
Right.
So I've increased my assets, but I haven't made any money from it.
Right.
It's like your primary residence, your house, the home you live in.
Yep.
You could have lots of equity, but you can't really live on it unless you sell it
Right.
or borrow money.
So these are assets that are going to be part of your legacy because your next generation might say, sell all those shoes, sell all those posters, sell that stuff because we're not attached to it. And boy, there was money made in it. Yet you're talking about the ideal asset is one that makes us income while it's actually increasing in value.
Yeah. Let's think about another type of real estate.
Okay.
My friends in Arizona, in the summer, it gets really hot.
Yes.
So a lot of my friends own cabins up in the mountains in areas like Prescott or Pine Top,
Yep.
these different communities, right?
Yep.
And if you bought one of those homes up there, they've gone up in value. They're assets. They've done pretty good.
Okay.
However, if they didn't rent it out and they just used it for personal use,
Yes.
it doesn't create income.
Right.
It's actually an expense. Now, why is it an expense, Bob?
Well, because I have to pay the mortgage or the taxes or whatever I have on it, and I don't have any income coming in because of that asset.
Yeah, the insurance, the repairs, all that, right?
Electricity bill,
All
all the
that.
bills you're going to pay. Yep.
It's actually taking money away from building wealth.
Right. So it might be increasing $1,000 a year, yet it's costing you $500 a year to keep it. It's really only creating you a $500 a year asset in that example.
Correct.
Okay.
Or it could be a negative 500 if
Yes.
those expenses are high, right?
Right.
Well, a lot of my friends buy homes in areas that they love, but when they're not using it, they rent it out. And that rental income tends to be greater than their total expense. So they get the benefit of enjoying the asset, but they still make income from it.
Right.
Which is the type of assets we want. We want assets that generate income. The simplest example of this would be a savings account that has a high interest rate being paid to us.
They have those?
Well, it's been funny for the last 8 years that didn't exist.
Right.
But right now you can get 4.5% or 5%
Right.
on just having your money in a bank account. That's not bad.
Sure.
It's not bad.
Better than keeping it under the mattress.
Indeed, right? And what makes that a good asset is you don't have to sell it, withdraw it, or do anything. It just makes income.
Right.
So if you had enough cash in that bank account, you could actually live off just the interest,
Sure.
which, just to be clear, everybody, we don't in here.
No, gosh, no.
But that would be cool. Here's another example. If we were to invest in a stock that goes up in value over time,
Okay.
that's a asset that's good because it increases in value,
Bad because I have to sell it to get the worth of it.
with one exception. A stock that pays a what?
Dividend.
A dividend. A dividend is when a stock says, hey, we are going to distribute pieces of profit
Yep.
on a regular basis.
Right.
A bunch of my friends are associated with a company in real estate. That company just announced a 6 cents per share dividend.
Right.
So if you owed 1,000 shares, you would get 1,000 times 6 cents for that quarter of owning.
Got
and
it.
you can actually find stocks that pay dividends equal to 5-10% of the money you invested. It's actually a pretty good return.
Yeah, I know Apple pays dividends. I just reinvest them.
Yeah. They have from time to time, right?
Right. I just reinvest the dividends instead of saying, oh, good, some money that came in.
Assets give you more control over your money. And when you turn them into income producing assets, you can wake up one day and actually have no need to work. And that's the reason we're spending so much time talking today about assets, because we want you to understand that the more good assets you buy, the quicker wealth is going to become a reality. So let's go back to our workbook and talk about a word called liabilities. Liabilities are monies that you owe to people, sometimes referred to as debts, and they can offset the value of an asset. In the example of you have a house worth $100,000 but a mortgage of $50,000, the mortgage is the liability, the $100,000 is the asset, and the difference is your net worth. So in the workbook, there is a sheet under the net worth section that says, please make a list of all of your liabilities, the total amount of all your mortgages, the total amount of all of your auto loans, the total amount of your credit card balances, your student loans, your back taxes owed, your home equity lines of credit,
Yes.
or your second mortgage, so to speak,
Right.
any other personal lines of credit, any debt you have against investments, like some people borrow against their 401k or their retirement account.
Okay.
Any debt against mutual funds, any business debt, family or friend debt. Say hypothetically you owe me money.
Right.
Nobody in this room does, but I'm sure there's people listening today that might have borrowed money and never once paid me back, hypothetically. You're going to take and add up all of that, and that's going to be your total liabilities.
Okay, so this is where, as we said earlier, the car's worth $30,000. I listed that on the asset. I still owe $10,000. That's going here under auto loan, part of this liability piece.
Exactly.
Okay.
You can do this in the worksheet, Bob, or you can do this in the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet will automatically calculate the end outcome.
So it probably makes a lot of sense to go back up to those assets that we collected earlier and kind of outlined, right? And
Yes.
just make sure that we kind of look through each one of those assets and determine, is there a corresponding liability for any of these assets that we have in here?
Right.
Yeah, that's smart. Make sure you don't forget any.
Okay.
At the very bottom of this sheet, you're going to add up the total of your liabilities, and then there's a spot for you to subtract the total value of your assets
Yep.
minus your liabilities.
Okay.
When I started doing this, I had, literally the very first time, I had about 750,000 in assets.
Okay.
Pretty cool, huh?
Sure. Sounds awesome.
But I had 1.25 million in liabilities,
Yep.
which means my net worth was
Oh, I don't know, Bob.
Negative $500,000.
Thank you.
negative $500,000. It was like negative 502,000.
Right.
It was the first time in my life that I had a reality check and I understood the consequence of my decisions. And I wasn't sad. I was actually excited that I had something to work on and something to change. Our net worth tracker, if you update it on a monthly basis,
So that's how often you'd recommend.
every month,
Okay.
I do mine around the 15th
Okay.
because that's when I get my credit card statements and my retirement account statements and my new mortgage statements and so on.
Yep.
I would go into my net worth tracker, the spreadsheet that we provide all of you.
At winmakegive.com.
Yep. /wealth
Okay.
or
Or
/
resources.
resources.
Yep.
And you would see, for me, the first month it was negative 502,000. But the next month I paid down my credit card a little bit, and my mortgage payment paid down my principal a little bit, and I saved a little bit more cash. I was only negative 499, and then 498. And then over time, I remember it was a year or two later, as real estate values increased and my stock account, retirement account rebounded, and I paid down my debt. I remember looking up and getting to the point where it was zero, and I felt like now I had a fresh new start on life.
Right.
And it's changed dramatically.
Sure.
People, what's the quote? They often overestimate what they can do in the short term.
And underestimate what they can do in the long term.
Exactly. So my request is, if you want to be accountable, remember the lack of accounting means the lack of accountability.
Yes.
An accountable person tracks their net worth on a monthly basis. Have this conversation with your spouse and your kids. Do these things together, especially when you're married or have a partner. Both of you should be on the same page on what assets you have. What if something happened to you and your spouse or your kids didn't realize that you had those assets, and somehow that gets lost or forgotten? They don't know how to access it, or it isn't something that could help you if you're incapacitated, dead, sick, whatever. This is such an important exercise. As you do it over time, you are going to see your trajectory of, is my net worth increasing or decreasing, and why? Is it because I'm increasing assets every month, or reducing liabilities, or both?
Or is it actually not even anything you have any control over, because your net worth could change as the stock market and real estate prices change, even though you've done nothing different to make sure you're still staying aware of all of that?
The one smart thing you did is you didn't sell assets that go up in value over time. You
Right.
were being patient, right?
Hopefully.
We really want to ask you, when you take time at the end to work on the workbook, to do some reflection. Write down, what did you learn from doing this net worth tracker exercise and by understanding assets at a deeper level? And then do me one huge favor. Write down your net worth goal in a year, 3 years, and 5 years. If you've been doing the Win, Make, Give Wealth series already and you did the homework, see what you wrote down for your goal 2 years ago or 1 year ago when you first did the Wealth series.
You know, Ben, we had some interesting statistics we found while we were looking up net worth information. And sadly, I guess it's a few years behind. It's before just before COVID, 2019, when the Federal Reserve put out this report that we got our hands on, which showed the average and the median net worth amount by age groups. I thought it was interesting. So people younger than 35 had an average net worth of $76,340. Yet the median was $14,000. Now, you know the difference between average and median, correct? Right? The average is just that. We all know we take all the under 35-year-olds, we add them all together, we divide by how many 35-year-old under people there were. The median, though, is the exact middle. If we wrote them all out in order, where was middle?
So half of people under 35 have a net worth less than 14,000. Half of them have a net worth more.
Correct. And the average was 76,730, which means those who are probably on the higher side really pulled that number up.
Yeah, big time.
Right? Okay. 35 to 44-year-olds, it was 437,000 was the average, with 91,000 being the median. 45 to 54, we got to $834,000 for the average, 169,000 for the median. And as we went up, the numbers do too. 55 to 64-year-olds, almost $2 million was our average. 213,000 was the median.
Which, look, I mean, that makes sense, right? Over the arc of your life, you have more time to accumulate assets. You have the more time for those assets to grow in value, right? The people in those upper age brackets may have lived in their house for 30 years, and the people in those lower age brackets bought 5 years ago.
Absolutely. Or they've held their stocks for that much longer in the market, or whatever it is that has driven things up. I just find it interesting that the average was considerably ahead of the median. And I want our audience to hear that yes, there is the average, which is being pulled up most likely by people with huge net worth that are out there that have created opportunities for themselves. Yet compare yourself to the median. That's that middle line that says, hey, if I'm between 45 and 54, the median is $168,800. Am I above or am I below that? As I'm kind of making myself aware of
averages are
this.
all like the Walmart grandkids are blowing out the averages down in that 30 to the under 35, right? Like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of averages. A really tough way to look at
or
that.
Taylor
Median
Swift. She's probably messing up that average.
Yeah, Taylor.
When it comes to it, right? Ben, we just want our audience to understand as they're figuring out their net worth, just like the reality check. There's no good, there's no bad. There's just where are you? And then, as you said, if I'm tracking monthly, and we did a whole episode on it, Bob, where you kind of went through your net worth tracker with our audience a while back on that episode, that it was the awareness. And as you said, Ben, watching yourself go from $500,000 negative net worth to the excitement of just getting to zero and feeling you had the fresh start before you were able to then see progress as you moved forward.
The top 10% of households own 76% of all wealth in the United States.
Well, that would explain to the average.
Yeah.
The bottom 50% of households own just 1% of all wealth. The median net worth in the United States, $121,700. Average net worth, you said, $748,800.
Yep.
Don't spend too much time comparing yourself. Focus on what Susie Ormond said, which was,
we tend to focus on assets and forget about debts. Financial security requires facing up to the big picture, assets minus debts.
ladies and gentlemen, if you write something down from this episode, please write this message down. In order to increase our net worth, we must spend less than we earn. Doesn't sound like rocket science, but it's important. In order to increase our net worth, we must spend less than we earn. With any excess left over, we use that to pay down our liabilities, debt, which increases our net worth, and we use excess to invest into more assets. We stop this process of paying off debt and buy more assets when our investments create the annual income needed to live our desired lifestyle.
All the stuff we talked about in the last episode, right? The income, the how much does it cost you to live each month or each year? Like, this is a complete picture now, or we're getting a more complete picture of our finances.
One of the most important calls in the Wealth series, this one, assets and tracking and calculating your net worth.
We want you to be aware of where you are today with your net worth so you too can see the progress, because I don't think there was anything more exciting than the Facebook posts through the Wealth series the first time of, I just increased my net worth by X. I just increased it this many times. It just went up by this much percentage, because our audience finally became aware of this and had something to focus on. And building assets is going to be one of the ways that's going to get you there. Folks, the Wealth series is something to share. I'm going to remind you of that each and every episode. If you're not sharing this with somebody, why not? This is not a secret. These are the conversations that sadly a lot of us did not have growing up, which is why Ben wants to bring them to you, your families, your friends, your community. Get a group together. See what you can do to grow other people's lives through the training and the information that we're sharing here. Make sure you have them all registered at winmakegive.com/wealth. And until our next episode, as always, do good.